In the NBA, nothing is ever guaranteed. With the league's speculative nature, even the draft has become a calculated risk. Teams often find themselves advancing with strategies based on players who haven't fully realized their potential or who may be in a decline. Every roster contains its share of uncertainties, and today we'll highlight the biggest question mark for each team as they prepare for the upcoming season. First up is the Celtics. The biggest question mark heading into the season revolves around Al Horford. At 38 years old, Horford is nearing the twilight of his career, but he still holds a crucial role in Boston's system. His veteran presence, defense, and ability to space the floor have been key assets in the Celtics' success in recent years. The question is, how long can Horford keep it up? The NBA is filled with elite younger big men who continuously elevate their game. Players like Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, and Giannis Antetokounmpo are only a few examples of big men who have set the bar incredibly high, and it's getting hard for older players like Horford to keep up physically, let alone compete at the same level. While Horford's basketball IQ and experience will always make him valuable, Boston has to wonder how much they can continue to rely on him as a major contributor. Next up, even as Karl Anthony Towns just got traded to the team, the New York Knicks' biggest question mark this season is OG Anunoby. While OG is undeniably a talented player, his contract has raised some eyebrows, with many wondering if he's being overvalued. Known primarily as a premier 3 and D player, Anunoby's defensive versatility is crucial, but his offensive output has been inconsistent, particularly from beyond the arc. Since joining the Knicks, his three-point shooting hasn't been as reliable, dropping from 6.3 attempts per game to just 4.5. In a team where the three-point line is often crowded, how can OG prove his worth if he can't get into a rhythm from deep? Add to that his history of injuries, and the question becomes whether the Knicks are getting full value from Anunoby or if his role needs to evolve to maximize his impact. The biggest question mark for the Bucks is one that may surprise you. The Milwaukee Bucks made a bold and risky move last season, hitting the panic button after their rough start with Damian Lillard. In their desperation to turn things around, the franchise may have made one of the biggest mistakes in its entire history, hiring Doc Rivers. Rivers has a well-documented history of collapsing with talented rosters, especially in the playoffs. His track record of blowing 3-1 and 3-2 series leads has become infamous at this point, happening multiple times with teams like the Clippers or 76ers. These consistent failures in crucial moments have led many to question whether he's truly capable of leading a championship team, or if he simply rides the talent on his rosters until they reach a point where in-game adjustments and leadership are needed most, and then falls short. This season with the Bucks feels like it's Doc's final chance to prove that he's an elite coach. With stars like Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard, anything less than a deep playoff run will further cement his legacy as a coach who crumbles under pressure. Can Doc shake off his playoff demons, or will his tenure in Milwaukee end in disaster? Moving on to the Cavs, the man in question is Darius Garland. Garland had a promising start to his career with the Cleveland Cavaliers, quickly establishing himself as one of the league's rising young guards. However, since the arrival of Donovan Mitchell, Garland has struggled to find his place within the team's offense. Mitchell's ball-dominant style has seemingly overshadowed Garland, leaving questions about how the two can coexist effectively. What's more concerning is that even when Mitchell is out of the lineup, Garland hasn't fully returned to his previous form. This suggests that the issues run deeper than just playing alongside another high-usage guard. Whether it's a matter of confidence, system fit, or adjusting to a different role, Garland's struggles are becoming a significant question mark for the Cavs. If Garland can rediscover his game and adjust to his evolving role, the Cavaliers have the potential to become one of the East's most dangerous teams. But until then, his inconsistency raises doubts about whether the team can fully contend with its current structure. One of the biggest question marks for the Orlando Magic this season is Markelle Fultz, or the lack of him. Despite performing decently in his time with the team, Fultz remains unsigned as the season approaches. This raises questions about whether the Magic are hesitant to bring him back due to their commitment to Jalen Suggs, who they may be grooming as the point guard of the future. Even if Fultz does re-sign with Orlando, it's worth asking if he truly fits the team's timeline. At this point in his career, Fultz doesn't seem to have much room left for growth, but he also isn't really a seasoned veteran with the kind of experience and leadership that younger players need to lean on. He's stuck in an awkward middle ground, not quite a long-term building block and not quite the veteran mentor teams often value. Will we see the Magic committing entirely to their young core? There's a lot to think about over in Orlando. Moving on to Indiana, Tyrese Haliburton is without a doubt the focal point for the Indiana Pacers, showing flashes last season of being an elite guard. His ability to both shoot and distribute the ball makes him one of the most exciting young players in the league, but that's just it. Last season, these moments of brilliance came in flashes, not consistently. The big question for the Pacers is whether Haliburton can take the leap this year and be a truly elite player night in and night out. If he can, it could completely transform the Pacers' outlook. His improvement would not only elevate the team, but it could unlock the full potential of Pascal Siakam, who many believe is a better second option. Their games complement each other very well, and if Haliburton can maintain an elite level of play, it could make the Pacers a real threat in the East. This season will be key in determining whether Haliburton can become the franchise cornerstone that Indiana needs him to be. On to the 76ers, Joel Embiid has been nothing short of dominant in the regular season, earning MVP honors and establishing himself as one of the best big men in the league. However, when the playoffs arrive, Embiid's performance consistently falls off a cliff. Despite his regular season dominance, he has never put together a truly great playoff run, leaving many questioning whether he can elevate his game when it matters most. Embiid is often compared to Nikola Jokic, but the gap between their playoff performances is stark. While Jokic has led his team to a championship, Embiid has yet to do the same, and time is running out. He hasn't even played against Jokic in Denver since 2019, fueling further doubt about whether he can truly compete at the highest level when the stakes are raised. This season could be one of, if not Embiid's last chance to prove that he can carry a team to a championship. Moving on to Miami, Tyler Herro has been a project for the Miami Heat for 5 full seasons, but after showing promise early in his career, he seems to have hit a wall over the past 3 years. His statistics have remained essentially unchanged during this period, raising concerns about his ability to evolve into the star player Miami envisioned. Tensions are mounting in Miami as expectations rise. This season may be Herro's last chance to prove he was worth all the attention and development that the Heat have invested in him. If he cannot take that next step and become a consistent contributor, the team might look to move on from him. The Chicago Bulls find themselves at a crossroads with Zach LaVine. As the team grapples with the fallout from their failed super team experiment, a major question looms. Will they trade Zach? If so, the Bulls could fetch a significant return, as LaVine still possesses considerable value as an all-around scorer, making him an attractive asset for many teams looking to bolster their rosters. A trade would signal a clear commitment to a full rebuild, especially after the recent departure of DeMar DeRozan to Sacramento. The signs are pointing towards a major roster overhaul, and parting ways with LaVine could be that next step. For the Bulls, the decision to trade LaVine will not only shape their future, but will determine how quickly they can pivot back into contention. If they do decide to move him and get good value in return, it could mark the beginning of a fresh chapter for Chicago basketball. Now for the Hawks. Jalen Johnson had a breakout season with the Atlanta Hawks last year, averaging an impressive 16 points, 9 rebounds, and 3.5 assists. His emergence came at a crucial time for the Hawks, raising questions about whether he can take an even bigger leap this year. Could he potentially become an all-star or anything close to it? Despite Johnson's development, the Hawks have struggled to build a solid supporting cast around Trae Young. The motivation and urgency within the team have waned within recent years, leaving many wondering if Johnson's rise could be the spark that ignites both his and Trae's game. If Johnson can continue to improve and become a reliable second option, it might just be exactly what Trae needs to elevate his performance and regain his status as one of the league's elite guards. This upcoming season will be pivotal for both Johnson and the Hawks as they look to establish a more cohesive and competitive identity. Moving over to Brooklyn, Ben Simmons. The big question this offseason is, will we finally get to see that jumper he's been grinding every summer? Is this the year we witness the transformation of Simmons into a 30-10-10 player? But let's be real. The more pressing issue might just be which Chinese team he's going to join next. Forget the NBA, maybe he's just waiting for a lucrative offer to the CBA to showcase his shooting skills in a less scrutinized environment. Moving on to the Raptors, Scottie Barnes has certainly made a splash in his first couple of seasons, proving himself as a rising star in the league. With his limitless potential, some fans are already dreaming of a Giannis Antetokounmpo-like transformation, only with a dash of Scottie flair. The real question is, can he prove this year that he'll be capable of leading the Raptors into a new era? Barnes will have to have a stellar season for the Raptors to consider him worthy of building the team around one guy. If Barnes can refine his jump shot and continue to develop his basketball IQ, Toronto might just find themselves in a situation where they give themselves the green light to build around Scottie Barnes. The Charlotte Hornets have been in the dumps for the past few seasons, or maybe decades. I don't know, we've lost count. But the drafting of Brandon Miller shines as one of the few positives, especially with the rookie averaging 17 points per game. With the Hornets desperately needing a turnaround, Miller's potential is more crucial than ever. With LaMelo Ball's ongoing injury struggles raising concerns about his availability, the urgency to elevate Miller's role has never been higher. While LaMelo is undeniably talented, if Miller can step up and assume a primary offensive role, it could dramatically reshape the Hornets' trajectory. A strong performance from Miller next season could be the catalyst for the team to finally escape the lottery trap and fight for playoff contention. As Charlotte fans brace for the upcoming season, all eyes will be on Brandon Miller. Now on to the Wizards. Jordan Poole literally turned the Washington Wizards into a circus last year when he was brought in to be the #1 option. From wild shots to inconsistent performances, Poole's inaugural season in DC was nothing short of chaotic. However, amidst the chaos lies an important question. Can he not only turn the team around, but also his entire career and image? Poole does have the talent to be a dynamic scorer, but he needs to find a way to harness that talent effectively. If he can develop a more consistent approach and learn to lead the team both on and off the court, there's a chance for a significant turnaround. Last and still least for the East, Detroit. Cade Cunningham has faced his fair share of struggles with injuries early in his career, but he's shown immense potential and talent that cannot be overlooked. As the Pistons look to rebuild and regain their competitive edge, the burning question is, can Cade return to the court and demonstrate that he has all-star potential? If he can shake off the injury bug and tap into skills that made him the #1 overall pick, he could invigorate not only his game but the entire Pistons franchise. The opportunity to showcase his abilities and lead his team to a brighter future is right in front of him. This is his chance to prove that he's not just a promising talent, but a genuine game changer.
Now moving on to the Western Conference with the #1 seeded OKC Thunder. The absolute masterclass Sam Presti has displayed while assembling this team is something that most franchises should be studying when it comes to the rebuild. With the single season jump seeing the team go from 10th in the West and missing out on the playoffs altogether 2 years ago to, as mentioned, the top seeded team in their conference. And this massive turnaround came from the entire squad, opposed to just one player coming in and changing the team's trajectory like when LeBron came back to Cleveland. While this team was one of the most well-rounded squads in the entire league, they were missing one crucial piece, a legit center. But again, in typical Sam Presti fashion, he wasn't willing to just sit around and wait. Instead, he immediately hit the market to take advantage of the momentum the team was building. And at that moment, almost the perfect guy became available, and that's what makes Isaiah Hartenstein's arrival a massive question mark for this franchise. The Thunder very well could have been the ones ending up against the Celtics in the finals, but their series against the finals-bound Dallas Mavericks exposed their weakness in the team. Many people noticed the issue leading up to that point, but the fact of Chet Holmgren playing out of position at the 5 was just too glaring to ignore against the Mavs, who were consistently hounding Chet, throwing either Derek Lively or Daniel Gafford his way to slowly but surely wear him down over time, and to the point they effectively took him out of the offense and just overall getting torched on the rebounds as well. So theoretically, Isaiah's arrival would move Chet back to his natural position, plus also solving the rebounding issue when they face teams like the Nuggets, Timberwolves, or Mavs in the postseason. Speaking of the Nuggets, they've quickly gone from dynasty talks to standing by as teams like the Thunder, Mavs, and Timberwolves are quickly gaining ground on them. For last year, a big issue for the franchise was trying to fill the void that was left by Bruce Brown. The front office was, and still are, expecting both Christian Braun and/or Peyton Watson to fill that role. And that within itself will be a question for the team, but it kinda doesn't mean anything without their star duo performing at their best. And for Jamal Murray, that hasn't really been the case. Most fans would have heard of the season-long championship hangover that most teams go on. And funnily enough, there hasn't even been a single championship team that's come back the next year to make it out of the second round since the 2018 Warriors. So Jamal's poor performance over last year, and especially in the playoffs, can be somewhat excused. But again, for a franchise that had as high of hopes as the Nuggets had just 11 months ago, that's not really good enough. Jokic is still doing Jokic things, but for that elite two-man game to work, the Nuggets need Jamal to be hitting his shots. So going into this season, that'll definitely be something to keep an eye on. And if he is back to his normal self, then it'll all be about Braun and Watson's development. While planning this video, we originally had Anthony Edwards and his leadership being the big question for the Timberwolves. But since then, the franchise has had a pretty massive shakeup, and so now the fit of Julius Randle seems to be something this franchise should be keeping an eye on. After bouncing around from Los Angeles to New Orleans, Julius Randle finally found himself a home in New York, where he would finally pop off and reach the potential a lot of people suspected was there. He had a brief stint being the face of the Knicks, but after Jalen Brunson came in and led the team on an exciting playoff run without him, before accepting a very heavily discounted contract to free up more space for the Knicks to bring in more talent, that spot as King of New York was quickly usurped. And so it was only natural that the franchise and Julius Randle would be parting ways. His destination being Minnesota is a little surprising given how close they were last year, and honestly Julius's arrival could be a big disruption to what they were building on. One of the biggest issues with Julius is that he's kind of a ball stopper, and it'll only take so many times of Randle waving off Anthony Edwards for an ISO that he has no business being a part of before Ant starts to rightfully get upset. It'll be interesting to see how both Ant and Julius Randle coexist on the floor, but that'll definitely be a sore spot for the franchise if things don't go well. Either way, no matter your opinion on the Knicks T-Wolves trade, I think it's fair to say that both their futures are a lot less bleak than the next team we're going to talk about, the LA Clippers. The experiment of Kawhi and Paul George seems to definitely be a resounding failure. Well, back in the summer of 2019, when they were acquiring the two, the franchise had prospects of keeping the pair for quite a while. And so they leveraged their future and sent it away to OKC. And now it's not like this team has a whole lot of assets now to sell off to rebuild, so for this season and the foreseeable future, the Clippers' hopes rest with Kawhi Leonard. At least he's good at the resting part, but having your franchise rely on a 33-year-old who's had one single season playing over 60 games for your team isn't ideal. Also, even if he is healthy, we've never actually seen him on a team that's roster is as poor as the Clippers roster currently is. So personally, I don't really have high hopes for their future and even this current season, but maybe Kawhi still has it in him to carry the biggest burden he's had to yet in his career. Now for the Dallas Mavericks, who are continuing to build onto their roster after making a kinda surprising finals push. To the team's credit, the backcourt duo of Luka and Kyrie seems to be a massive success in their first full season. The team looks really well rounded, and they outclassed and outworked a lot of the competition they faced in last year's playoffs. But sadly, just couldn't get it done against the Celtics. And one pretty major issue that was popping up against the Celtics was their pretty horrible shooting. And so the arrival of Klay Thompson could either be a very great decision or a piss poor one if he starts to look like the player he was while finishing out the season last year. The positive thing is he's on a relatively cheap contract. If it works out, even in just the slightest bit, it'll be well worth the average $16 million a year. However, Klay does have the potential to get a little cocky and in his own head. And now that he's separated from Steph for the first time in his career, he might feel like he has something to prove. But that's something that definitely is not needed on this team. And at this stage in his career, the best thing for Klay is honestly just to try to be an elite shooter. So if he can live up to that, then it'll help open up the floor in a similar fashion to the 2018 Rockets. For the Phoenix Suns, the unknown isn't around just one single player. It's about the success of the entire Big Three. Obviously, over last year, the majority of problems were coming from Bradley Beal's inconsistency, but he can't be entirely blamed for the Suns falling short of expectations. Devin Booker was definitely out of position as the team's point guard. He's a clear-cut two guard. For the most part, I kind of understand what the franchise was trying to do, but still, the arrival of Tyus Jones is a very welcome sight for this roster. And hopefully now that he's there, that'll help free up Booker to get back to his normal role and be more capable of picking up the slack if Bradley Beal remains in his slump. Which isn't really a slump, by the way. This is kind of just who he's been for the last few seasons, but benefiting from being on the horrible Wizards roster. As for KD, it's really just a question of how long he can sustain this level of play. In all fairness, he really hasn't showed any signs of slowing down whatsoever, even managing to play 75 games, something that he hasn't been able to do since he was with the Warriors. So here's hoping that we get yet another dominant season from KD, but that will definitely be something in the back of the minds of many people in the front office. Either way though, if this Big Three doesn't make some serious noise in the postseason, I think the front office will be looking to break up the team anyways. For the Pelicans, you could definitely say that their season kind of hinges on DeJounte Murray stepping up and fitting into this roster the way that the team envisioned when they picked him up. But similarly with the Nuggets' hopes of Christian Brown and Peyton Watson stepping up, it all kind of doesn't matter unless their star player is at their peak. And that's why the Pelicans season truly does depend on Zion taking his health seriously and bearing down to make sure that he's able to be out there when the rest of his teammates need him to step up. His promising return last year was a great sign, but again, it kind of all is for nothing if you can't finish out the season, or at least bring your team to a point where they might be able to get it done without you. And for Zion, that willingness to carry that burden hasn't really been there, and now with a lot of good pieces around him, the franchise has a real shot at actually making a solid push. So if Zion can't help get it done this year, then the bigger question of what the team's going to look like in 5 years should start to pop up. For the Lakers, a big question is if Anthony Davis is going to finally officially take the leap as the team's first option. Even though it kind of seems like age doesn't affect LeBron and his retirement date will just probably be whenever he gets bored of the league, AD fully ascending to lead the team would ultimately be the best thing for the franchise, if that's the direction they plan to go in post LeBron. He's always going to consistently be one of the best defending big men in the entire league, but right now he has the benefit of playing behind Bron. And it's been a while since he's been the definitive number one guy on both ends of the floor. And last time he was, it's not like those Pelicans teams were the greatest around. So AD taking that next step will truly be the make or break for this team. But if I was JJ Redick, I'd still keep the hands out of the pockets just in case. The Sacramento Kings finally broke their historic playoff drought, only to enter it once again 1 season later. So in an attempt to capitalize on that momentum they briefly had, they went out and picked up DeMar DeRozan. At the ripe age of 35, it'll be interesting to see if DeMar still moves the needle that much. But given the rest of the talent in the West, even if the franchise does squeak through to the playoffs, they're going to need as much firepower as they can get in the postseason. And any Raptors fan can tell you that despite DeMar being the franchise point leader, those points kind of disappear in the playoffs. So although the franchise is putting a lot of weight on his shoulders, he might not be able to carry that burden at this age or really any time in his career. The next team is the Golden State Warriors. Their biggest question is Draymond Green, and that question is, which one of his teammates is he going to sucker punch next year? The Houston Rockets have been undergoing a rebuild for the past couple of seasons, and one of the players at the heart of that rebuild is Alperen Şengün. Alp's progression in the league has gone off without a hitch. And if the franchise does choose to go all in with Şengün as the top guy, then that might actually be their best option. However, it should be noted that his three-point game is pretty much non-existent, and if he wants to take that next step to a truly elite player, that's something he's going to need to work on. For the Utah Jazz, they had a very, very small but exciting window of success in 2022 when the team started off going 12-6 through their first few games. And at that point, they were amongst the top teams in the West, but after November, the team would fail to regain that spark. Possibly intentionally, as they were probably trying to tank for Wemby like every other subpar team in the league. But through those first few games, one of the main reasons for the team finding success was Lauri Markkanen having a completely random pop-off season 6 years into his career. Truthfully, there's not a whole lot to say about Lauri and the Jazz, but as the team's only real asset aside from maybe Walker Kessler and Keontae George, the team lives and dies with whatever happens to him. For the Grizzlies, I think the answer is pretty obvious. Ja Morant is the key to this team's success. We saw what the team looked like without him versus with him for those brief 9 games last year. But with Ja already suffering a slight injury in the preseason, it's not off to a great start. Now on to the San Antonio Spurs. We actually made a video on this channel last year about how the Spurs were failing Wemby by not getting him at least a half-decent point guard. And although I understand some fans saying that there's no need to rush, it's clear that Victor isn't like any other rookie we've ever seen. It almost feels like he went through 3 years of development in just one single season last year. So trying to become competitive as soon as possible, or at least laying the groundwork for that, should be something that causes a little bit more urgency. And it seems like the front office shared our opinion. And beyond that, we even suggested that the ideal player for the franchise to go out and grab would be Chris Paul. And the franchise went out and did just that. So his arrival undoubtedly will be one of the more exciting things to watch over the entire season. Whether it's the actual highlight lobs to Wemby, or just watching to see if CP's vet presence on a player like Stephon Castle has a similar effect as it did when he spent a year with Shea in OKC. And now on to the last team in this video, the Portland Trail Blazers. Their biggest question mark going into this season would probably be Deni Avdija. Coach Chauncey Billups kind of got misquoted saying that he was the best player on the team, when actually he said that there were a few games in practice where he looked like the best guy out there. The team still does have young talent like Shaedon Sharpe, Anthony Simons, and Scoot Henderson, but Deni did show potential at the end of the season with Washington. So the franchise bringing him in might be a move to become more competitive quicker than what they had planned. Although it should be said that Deni is definitely not the type of player to carry a team by any means. But he might put up some pretty decent stats on a team that is still probably going to be pretty bad. And that's it for this video. If you feel like we were wrong on any of our picks, feel free to let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe to not miss out on any of our other videos.